Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Should be yet another great show tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notifications bell. I am looking forward to engaging with all of you, having a great conversation tonight. Yeah, glad to be here. Another one of our great late night chats. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and away we go.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you. Should be yet another great show tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Tonight, we are going to talk about a lot of different things. For those of you who may not be familiar with the way we do things, the way this works is I give my opening remarks. My opening remarks are then followed by a roll call where we find out who is on the other side of the camera. And then from there, after the opening remarks and after the roll call, from there, I answer your super chat questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of our program, the best thing to do is send me a super chat. Send me a Rockfin tip, send me a Rumble rant, do what Battle Cossack just did, and send me a question and I will make a point of answering it. It is your super chats, your Rumble rants, your Rockfin tips that make the second half of the show so gosh darn exciting, because it's just me off the cuff responding to your questions. And that is awesome. So make sure that you ask me something, give me something to respond to, give me something to comment on, give me something to react to. Second half of the show is all you guys. So do your part. That's what I ask you to do. Many people don't watch these streams until after they've already gone up. But you that are watching live, you have the special privilege of being able to make these conversations go however you want. So I encourage you to use that power wisely. Use that power wisely. There you go. So on that note, I do want to make one quick announcement. Coming up in Washington, D.C., February 17th, there will be an amazing anti-war rally happening. Defeat the Deep State. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great, great event. And I want you there. I want you to be there because it's going to be such an awesome, important, great event. So I would like you to be there. We will be there in big numbers as the Center for Political Innovation, CPI. We think it's a great mobilization. We sponsored last year's rally for Rage Against the War Machine. This one, Rage Against the War Machine 2, Defeat the Deep State. We are going to be there. So be there with us. Should be good. That's my first announcement. I think that's the only announcement for tonight. A lot of different projects are in the works right now. I've got a new book that should be out soon. I'm just short, a little booklet we've made, and a lot of great stuff is happening. We got, a national training school that will be happening for CPI April 26th to April 30th. We'll be getting the announcement out soon. That'll be in Vermont. Details of that are coming. A lot of great stuff is happening. I'm headed to Russia for the World Youth Festival, and, we have a whole delegation, and a lot of things are happening. So we'll keep you up to date on everything that's happening. But those are the two big announcements. I guess the one big announcement, February 17th, we are having a mobilization. We are sending our people to defeat the deep state. It's going to be a great demonstration. So be there. So on that note, I am going to jump into my opening remarks for tonight. But keep the super chats, Rumble rants, Rockfin tips, the questions for me to answer, the stuff for me to react to in the second half of our show. Keep it rolling in. Give me something to talk about in the second half of our program. I'll be, taking them down. We're on Rockfin right now. We're on Rumble right now. We have people watching us on many different platforms. So we ask that you do your part. So on that note, I am going to get into tonight's topic, which really in so many ways gets to a lot of what we talk about on these streams, because I just don't know how to tell you. I just don't know how to tell you how frustrated I get with how weird American politics has gotten over the last couple of years. It has gotten to be so bizarre, American politics, and up is down and left is right and backward is forward, and everything's all topsy-turvy and confused. So today was the sentencing of this guy. Now, if you followed January 6th and what happened afterwards, you will know about this fellow.
We need to go into the Capitol. Into the Capitol.
What?
No! Peacefully. Fed. Tomorrow, I don't even like to say it because I'll be arrested.
Well, let's not say it.
We need to go. I'll say it.
All right.
We need to go in.
Shut the fuck up, Boomer.
To the Capitol.
Base Fed posting? All right. We need to go into the Capitol. I didn't see that coming. Okay.
Monument Hill.
Stop speaking. We are going to the Capitol, where our problems are. It's that direction. Please spread the word. All right. No, okay, but one more thing.
Yeah, so can we go up there? No?
When we go in,
Are we going to get arrested if we
leave
go
this
up there?
here. You don't need to get
Did you
shot.
arrest us all?
So that guy that you just saw in the video, Mr. Ray Epps, he was many, many times caught on video urging people to go into the U.S. Capitol building. Many, many times he was caught doing that. And then many people pointed out that his name was not on the FBI wanted list afterwards, which was very odd. All the individuals who were in the Capitol, their names, their faces were on the wanted list. The ones who were arrested had arrested put after their name. But for some reason, his name, this guy Ray Epps, was not listed on the FBI wanted list. And they finally did figure out who he was. His name was Ray Epps. And he was going around telling everyone to go into the Capitol. But for some reason, the FBI was not looking for him. And the FBI was not trying to figure out who he was. And he just, for some reason, did not show up in any of the FBI materials related to January 6th. A lot of Trump supporters thought that was a little bit weird, thought it was strange and suspicious. And, this guy's going around telling people to go into the Capitol. This guy, and it was a little bit weird. And so then the New York Times and 60 Minutes went into overdrive. Oh my gosh. This is a conspiracy theory, they told us. No. This guy was not an FBI informant. This guy was not an FBI agent. No. That's crazy Trumper propaganda. Oh my God. And 60 Minutes did a story and they ruined his life. And oh my God, the Trumpers just destroyed this poor innocent man's life. It's funny. All the other people who were in the Capitol were all a bunch of criminals who deserve to be going to jail for the rest of their lives. But this guy who's actually on tape going around telling people that you know, that if they go into the Capitol, to go into the Capitol, that guy, for some reason, he was a good guy who was just misunderstood, and he got canceled, and his reputation was destroyed. And 60 Minutes did a story about how awful the Trump supporters were being. And he's crazy. The idea that there would be an FBI informant who would make something happen, that's just crazy. And oh my God, it was, oh, poor Ray Epps, you know, the New York Times, you know, the violins came out, 60 Minutes did a whole story about it. So we were told that no, this guy, even though he disappeared from the FBI's most wanted list, even though the FBI was not pursuing him, even though all of these things were the case, no, he could not have possibly been an FBI informant. And anyone who says that is just spreading conspiracy theories. Their argument that he was not an FBI informant was that people who say he's an FBI informant are bad people. And that's the argument. And that's the standard argument from mainstream media now. Something stops being true if they convince you that the people who say it's true are bad, right? And that was the way it was during the Vietnam War, right? If you pointed out that the U.S. government was murdering innocent people in Vietnam, well, that sounds like something that communists might say. So even if it's true, you're a communist, so you can't say it, right? You pointed out that during the Korean War, the United States carpet bombed civilians. Doesn't matter if it's true or not, because it sounds like something that a commie would say. And so it must be false. And that is the mainstream media's argument, right? That it must be false that Ray Epps, himself a Trump supporter, himself somebody going around urging people to go into the Capitol, it must be false that this guy was an FBI informant, because clearly the people saying that are Trump supporters. And we all know that Trump supporters are bad people. So anything they say must be false because they said it and they're bad, right? This is the Communist Party USA logic. This is PSL logic, right? This is Workers' World logic. This is the standard leftist interpretation. Bad people say that Ray Epps was an FBI agent. So therefore it's false. Evidence doesn't matter. That seems to be the argument. Well, today was Ray Epps' sentencing. And this was very interesting. So Friday, the prosecution asked for only 6 months in jail for Ray Epps. Even though he was on tape urging people to go into the Capitol, even though all of that, the prosecution asked for a 6-month prison sentence. Now, keep in mind, there are people that have gotten 20-year prison sentences. There are people that have gotten 10-year prison sentences for January 6th. Let's look up, prison sentences for January 6th. There are people that weren't even at the rally on January 6th who were charged with conspiracy, and got massive sentences, right? I mean, look at the list. We got the list of criminal proceedings from January 6th, right? Here's the official list. And you can go look at all the criminal proceedings that have gone on and the sentences that people have received. There was a reporter for InfoWars who did not go into the Capitol, who was outside, who cooperated with law enforcement afterwards, and he didn't get a long sentence, right? 84 months in prison for Christopher Michael Alberts, right? 70 days in jail for Ryan Keith Ashclock. All the names are here. You can read about all the sentences people have gotten. 41 months in jail. 46 months in jail. You can go down the list. Look at the sentences, right? 90 months in federal prison for Albuquerque Cosperhead, right? Mark Middleton. He hasn't been sentenced yet. 54 months of incarceration for Robert A. Minuta, right? Just read the list. Just go down the list. It's right there in front of you, right? All of these people have gotten sentences, many of them for years. Some of them, the ones they got on insurrection charges, decades in prison. So the prosecution asked for 6 months for Ray Epps. And then at his sentencing today, he got 0 jail time. Even though the prosecutor wanted 6 months, the judge said, you know what? No jail time. So that guy, all these people, some of whom did not even go into the Capitol, right? I've gone to jail for years. But Ray Epps, this individual who everyone insists was absolutely not an FBI informant. They say the prosecution wanted 6 months, and then the judge said, you know what? Nothing. He's got 1 year of probation. Now, all kinds of people who just followed the crowd into the Capitol are going away and doing prison time. An InfoWars reporter who didn't go into the Capitol and was outside is doing prison time. But this guy, Ray Epps, who they insist is not an FBI informant, and, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the oh my gosh, CBS News, 60 Minutes, they've all told us there's no way he could be an FBI informant. He got a year on probation. But it gets better. Oh, it gets so much better, folks, because on Friday, when the prosecution put in their request for him to get 6 months, this was the government's memorandum. This is the official court document. Unless someone can prove to me that this is a forgery, unless someone can show me that this is not a true document, this is the sentencing memorandum from the government for United States of America versus James Ray Epps. Yes, inciting people to go into the Capitol, and he gets no jail time. And we've been told by mainstream media he could not have been a federal agent, a federal provocateur. There's no way he was working with the government. But what does his sentencing memorandum say? What is on the next page of his sentencing memorandum? What does it say? Why are they asking for only 6 months? Why? This is a unique case of January 6 defendants. Although Epps engaged in felonious conduct during the riot, his case includes a variety of distinctive and compelling mitigating factors, which led the government to exercise its prosecutorial discretion and offer Epps a pre-indictment misdemeanor. Specifically, 1, Epps turned himself in to the FBI 2 days after the riot. 2, he cooperated with both the FBI and Congress, participating in lengthy voluntary interviews. I thought he never cooperated with the FBI. I thought he was. 3, he engaged in at least 5 efforts on January 6th to de-escalate conflict and avoid violence between rioters and police officers. He's also expressed remorse. So 5 times on January 6th, he was working with the government to de-escalate the crowd situation. 5 efforts on January 6th, according to actual court documents. This guy cooperated with the government to try and control the crowd. Now, I've been at some protests before. Do the cops pick random people out of the crowd to work with them to calm crowds down when people are getting rowdy? No. No, they do not. No, they do not. And later it says he did cooperate with the FBI and the Congress and do multiple voluntary interviews. So what 60 Minutes said was a lie. What the New York Times said was a lie. Unless the federal prosecutor who asked for him to get 6 months and he got nothing, he got no jail time, he got a year of probation. A year of probation, 100 hours of community service. This guy is not going to prison. But unless the federal prosecutor is lying, this guy did cooperate with the FBI. He was involved in 5 efforts on the day of January 6th to de-escalate conflict. So while they were de-escalating the crowd, he worked with them to de-escalate the crowd. That is according to the document. Plus, after that, he cooperated with the FBI and the Congress. So this guy is an FBI informant. Unless the federal prosecutor is lying, this man is a federal informant. He went and did lengthy interviews with the Congress and with the FBI afterwards. And on the day, 5 times, they say, he engaged in de-escalation operations with law enforcement against the crowd. Now tell me, how in the world can anyone say it's a conspiracy theory that this man was an informant when it is right here in the document that he was an informant, that he cooperated with the FBI, and that on January 6th, he was involved in de-escalation operations? He was an FBI informant. Ray Epps was an FBI informant. And unless this document is a complete forgery, Ray Epps was an FBI informant. It is all right there. That is a federal court document from the United States government. Unlike all kinds of other people who went to jail, went to prison for years, got year sentences, he got no jail time, even though they admit he engaged in felonious activity. We have video of him stirring up the crowd. We need to go into the Capitol. We need to go into the Capitol. I showed that to you. Ray Epps was an FBI informant. It's right there in the document. This is a fact. He was an FBI informant. He cooperated with the FBI. He was involved in efforts to de-escalate the crowd. The prosecutors only wanted to give him 6 months, but the judge said, oh no, we're going to give him 0 prison time. 0 prison time. So now you would think, right, the New York Times is going to apologize. They're going to apologize. But no. Oh, you know, now 60 Minutes is going to retract their piece about him. No. In fact, I went and looked him up on the Wikipedia page. All right? Wikipedia is supposed to be the for a long time, Wikipedia was not a credible source. No, you couldn't cite Wikipedia. Then all of a sudden, Wikipedia became kosher. Wikipedia became okay. It was okay to cite Wikipedia. And that's right when all kinds of efforts to control Wikipedia came into play. And even though the official document on Friday from the court says he was cooperating with the FBI, it says he did work with the FBI, he was involved in de-escalation operations in the Capitol. Like, even though it's all there, this is what the Wikipedia page says right now, as of this moment. James Ray Epps is a former United States Marine and Oath Keeper chapter president. Following the January 6th Capitol attack, conspiracy theories were shared on Twitter by former Fox News host Tucker Carlson. Conspiracy theories. Yeah, and the federal prosecutor listed those conspiracy theories in his document. The federal prosecutor also spread those conspiracy theories because it was in a federal court document that he was an informant. I mean, I just showed you the document. I'll show it again. But when you Google the name Ray Epps, all you find is these people saying there's these crazy conspiracy theories. These crazy conspiracy theories. I mean, we got a federal document right here. It says, cooperated with the FBI and Congress, engage in at least 5 efforts on January 6th to de-escalate conflict and avoid violence between rioters and police officers. Right there. Right there, it says he was working with the government. He worked with the government after January 6th and on January 6th. Doesn't say he worked with them beforehand. But we know on the day of January 6th, he was cooperating with law enforcement. That happened. And, you know, the argument that we get about why it is that Ray Epps was not a government informant, we are told, is because bad people say it. Right? Tucker Carlson is a bad person, we are told, and he said it, so it can't be true. Well, bad people, if you accept the premise that Tucker Carlson's a bad guy, bad people can indeed say true things. I mean, and then, of course, you have the testimony of the FBI director. The FBI director has been on Capitol Hill and has, under oath, refused many times to testify, to answer the question about whether or not there were informants in the crowd.
Director Ray, last year, you might recall, sir, our exchange regarding the orders up to the November election and in the weeks and days prior to January 6th and on January 6th here in D.C. We can't get a straight answer, although we have a tremendous amount of evidence harvested and reviewed over the course of the last year, which you will see. In September, Stephen D'Artano, formerly in charge of the FBI's field office in Washington, D.C., testified to the House Judiciary Committee that he was aware the FBI informants would attend the Stop the Steal rally thrown on January 6th. You confirmed that the FBI had confidential human sources at the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th here in D.C., sir?
Congressman, as we've discussed before, I'm not going to get into where we have or have not used confidential human sources. But what I can tell you...
So he won't answer the question.
You asked for a definitive
We'll move
answer.
on. It's my time. You said no, you're not going to answer. That's cool. We're watching.
Mr. Chairman, may I answer the question?
Your moment will come. This is my time. Earlier this year, an FBI informant who is reported to have, quote, under oath, marched to the U.S. Capitol with fellow Proud Boys members on January 6th, close quote. He said he was communicating with his FBI handler while people were entering the U.S. Capitol. Can you confirm that the FBI had that sort of engagement with your own agents embedded into the crowd on January 6th?
If you are asking whether the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources and or agents, the answer is emphatically
You're saying
not.
no?
No.
You're saying no?
Not
okay.
violence orchestrated by FBI sources or agents.
Are you familiar with you know what a ghost vehicle is? Director of the FBI certainly should. You know what a ghost bus is?
A ghost bus?
Ghost bus.
I'm not sure I've used that term before.
Okay. Well, it's pretty common in law enforcement. It's a vehicle that's used for secret purposes. It's painted over. These two buses in the middle here, they were the first to arrive at Union Station on January 6th, 0500. I have all this evidence. I'm showing you a tip of this iceberg.
Mr. Chairman.
These two buses
Mr.
are
Chairman.
painted completely white.
Point of order.
Point of order. Sure.
Just run over the time.
I understand, but you'll recall that Ms. Jackson Lee's been allowed to go 2 minutes before. I've been very fair in letting people finish their questioning throughout my tenure as chairman, and I'll continue to be fair on that regard. But I will make a note to the members, if you could stay as close within your time as possible. We have a lot of people that want to ask these gentlemen questions. So with that, the gentleman yields. But your point, I've been very fair in this, Mr. Ivey, with everybody on this side of the aisle just as much.
I don't think I accuse you of being unfair, Mr. Chairman.
You're making a point. Okay, thank you. I now recognize Mr.
May I
Ray.
close this statement, Mr.
No,
Chairman?
I think your time is expired, Mr.
I note that other members across the aisle have been granted time, and I object to my question being closed. This is a very significant hearing, Mr. Chairman, and these buses are nefarious in nature and were filled with FBI informants dressed as Trump supporters and deployed onto our Capitol on January 6th. Your day is coming, Mr. Ray.
Point, Mr. Higgins.
Yeah, I mean, and what I find to be frustrating about all of this, let me just back up from all of this a little bit. I want to talk to you all about this because during the 1960s, when there was a huge amount of political unrest in the United States, there was a very, very big effort by U.S. law enforcement to falsely imprison and frame up members of the Black Panther Party, civil rights activists, peace activists, Communist Party members. And it was called the Counterintelligence Program, COINTELPRO. And I used to tell people about it. And people would not believe me. And what's interesting is the only reason we know about it is because during the presidency of Jimmy Carter, there was something called the Congressional Church Committee. And it was, the 1960s political upsurge was over. And as part of kind of healing the country and bringing it together, in Congress, the Congressional Church Committee called the FBI and CIA before Congress, and they admitted all kinds of things that they did. And it was all over the newspapers, and it was considered public record that, yes, the FBI did harass and threaten Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Yes, the FBI did harass peace activists. Yes, the FBI did try to convince Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to commit suicide. All of this stuff was public record. And in the late 70s, it was, it was very much public record. Right? This is the letter that the FBI sent to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's a pretty nasty letter. They took a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the bathtub talking to Bayard Rustin, who was his assistant. And they took a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King in the bathtub talking to his assistant, Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was known to be gay. And so they sent the picture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the bathtub talking to Bayard Rustin to the newspapers, to the press. And they sent the picture, and they tried to tell the media that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was gay and that he was a homosexual, which back then was, quite a scandalous thing to be. And so they also had audio tapes of Dr. Martin Luther King having sex with prostitutes and engaging in sexual activities that, most people would not be comfortable or, wouldn't approve of. And then they sent Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. this letter. In view of your low-grade, abnormal personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with either a Mr. or a Reverend or a Doctor. And your last name calls to mind only the type of king such as King Henry VIII and the countless other acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. King, like all frauds, your end is approaching. You could have been our greatest leader. You, even at an early age, have turned out to be not a leader, but a dissolute, abnormal, moral imbecile. We now have to depend on our older leaders like Wilkins, a man of character. No person can overcome facts, not even a fraud like yourself. Lend your sexually psychotic ear to our enclosure. You will find yourself in your dirt, filth, and evil moronic talk exposed for the record of all time. King, there is only one thing left for you to do, and you know what it is, and you have just 34 days in which to do it. This is the exact number selected for a reason, as it was definitely practical and significant. You are done. There is one way for you. You better take it. Your filthy, abnormal, your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to our nation. This was written by the FBI and sent to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., along with audio tapes of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s sex life, as well as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sitting in the bathtub with Bayard Rustin. J. Edgar Hoover wrote this, the FBI director, and they sent it to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Pretty horrendous stuff. Urging him to commit suicide, blackmail, more or less. It's pretty nasty. And there's, I read, when I was in high school, I read a book on it. I was really into Ward Churchill back then. And, he was, I saw that he'd written this book. And so I read the COINTELPRO papers, documents from the FBI's secret war against dissent in the United States by Ward Churchill and Jim Vander Wall. And I read this book when I was in high school, and I read about all the nasty things they did. There was a guy who was a member of the Communist Party in the late 1950s, and he was a member of the Dock Workers Union, and he was an effective labor leader. And so the FBI started stealing money from the Communist Party's, treasury and putting it and planting it on this guy. And they framed him up for stealing money from the party, and they got him expelled from the party. Because they didn't want the Communist Party to have a very effective labor leader who could organize dock workers among their ranks. In addition to that, during the 1960s, the FBI had a guy who worked for them called Tony the Traveler. And Tony the Traveler would go to from college campus to college campus, and he would pretend to be an anti-war activist, a peace activist, and he would go from campus to campus, and he would show up and he would pretend that he was a leader of Students for a Democratic Society. He would give names. He knew how to drop names, and he would pretend he was like a national leader of the group. And he would show up at the college campus, and then he would teach the young people, the college kids, how to make bombs. And he would teach them how to make bombs, how to set explosives, and he would argue with them and convince them, no, you got to blow things up. You got to do this. And then he would convince these college kids to go blow something up, and they would go and plant a bomb, and the police would be right there and drag them to jail. Yeah, that would happen, right? The FBI, very specifically, they had a memo talking about how the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States was the free breakfast program of the Black Panther Party, right? It was the free breakfast program of the Black Panther Party was the biggest internal threat to the security of the country, because all these young Black children would go and get breakfast from the Black Panthers, and they would learn about communism, right? And they couldn't have that. The free breakfast program they thought was the greatest threat, to the internal security of the United States. The greatest possible threat was the free breakfast program. Here, this was when the Black Panthers had their free breakfast program. The FBI called it the greatest internal threat. There was also an FBI document where they said they wanted to stop the rise of a Black Messiah, right? They said that was their greatest fear, was the rise of a Black Messiah. a leader of the black community who could rally the black community, and they wanted to stop the rise of a black messiah. That was one of their stated purposes. They absolutely wanted to stop the rise of a black messiah. That was something that they very much were dedicated to doing. They didn't like that the Black Panthers were feeding people. We know about the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We know about the death of Malcolm X. We also know about the death of Fred Hampton. And then, the Congressional Church Committee brought this all into public record. And it brought it all into public record. Now there's no question that these things went on. The U.S. Congress had hearings about it. The FBI admits they did it. All the files are released. The FBI and their targeted harassment of journalists and anti-war activists and black revolutionaries and civil rights organizers. It's all public record now. It's all public record. But I remember when I was in college and I would tell people about COINTELPRO, what would they say to me? And these tended to be conservatives, Bush supporters. They'd say, that's a conspiracy theory. That didn't happen. Nuh-uh. The FBI would never do something like that. And I would be like, no, there's congressional hearings about it. There were court documents released. The FBI admits that they did this. Nuh-uh. That's just something you're trying to say to get us to not like America. That's because you're anti-American. And it's true. It is a fact that the FBI did these things. It is an utter and complete fact. But even though it was in the congressional record, even though the country basically came to terms with it, even though the Socialist Workers' Party sued the FBI and won millions of dollars, I would tell people about it during the Bush years when the Republicans were the main party of U.S. imperialism. I would tell people about it, and people would insist, that can't be true, nuh-uh. And their reason that it couldn't be true was because they know that the FBI are good and that only bad people don't like the FBI. And so because that sounds like something that a bad person, like a communist or a terrorist or a liberal or a hippie anti-American person would say, because it sounds like something that a bad person would say, it can't be true. And that was that. And there were many people that I printed out articles and gave them to. I showed them books about it, and it was just hear no evil, see no evil. No, can't be true, can't be true. No, the FBI doesn't do bad things. The FBI never does bad things. It's not true. And that was the way the political establishment responded to it. And what that really was that if you became aware that the FBI was engaging in these kinds of activities and had done these kind of criminal activities, that changed your attitude. You were obligated to live your life differently. You couldn't just believe in America anymore. You couldn't just believe in the American dream. And for people that were in the middle class, people that had a comfortable standard of living, people that supported the U.S. wars in Iraq, if they were to acknowledge that, if they were to actually let themselves acknowledge that the American government declared war on the civil rights movement, that the American government tried to get Dr. Martin Luther King to kill himself, that the American government, destroyed the lives of all kinds of people and had a whole program for punishing dissidents, they just couldn't live their life anymore. Right? They couldn't be good middle-class Americans anymore if they heard that, so they just didn't want to hear it. And then I noticed that 2008, the U.S. economy crashed. Barack Obama became president. And then things started getting weird. Do folks remember this movie? All right. Do people remember this movie that came out? The J. Edgar Hoover movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio. 2011, the same year as Occupy Wall Street. Leonardo DiCaprio starred in a Hollywood movie about the life of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. And the movie talks about COINTELPRO. The movie talks about his attack on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But the movie makes it sound like it was some kind of psychological problem that J. Edgar Hoover had. You know, it was the fact that J. Edgar Hoover was he was an egomaniac, and he was jealous of Dr. Martin Luther King, and he was too close to his mother, and he was secretly gay, and it was all just a personal thing. It leaves out the fact that the Communist Party had been the leader of the Black Civil Rights Movement, had organized the Civil Rights Congress, that the Communist Party had been at the center of the Black freedom struggle, that the Soviet Union had taken a petition exposing Jim Crow segregation to the UN, and that J. Edgar Hoover was absolutely right to think that the Civil Rights Movement had communists in it, because it did, because communists were right, leaves that out completely. No, J. Edgar Hoover just had a psychological problem. So after this movie came out, all of a sudden, then the normies thought, okay, suddenly the normies admitted that yes, the FBI did things, but it was back when there was this bad guy who was the head of the FBI. There was this bad guy who was played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who was like secretly gay and was jealous of MLK. So that's why we did it. There was one bad guy who had a personal disagreement with somebody, and we don't do that anymore, of course. We don't do that anymore, but it was because there was this one bad guy. And I thought, okay, so where's my apology, normies, for the time that you told me this could never happen? Now we admit that this did happen, but because you saw in a Hollywood movie, and like, you know, the relationship between Hollywood and American intelligence agencies, Hollywood and the Pentagon is pretty well documented. But I mean, you're not apologizing to me for the fact you were wrong. I was right. But now, no, I was right, but I had the reason all wrong. It was just because of a personality thing. Oh, okay. And then a couple years later, you had Ferguson, right? You had Ferguson. And you had the Baltimore uprising in 2015, the Baltimore riot. And then this happened. All right? Do we remember this? All right? Let me get you a picture I can show on the screen. Right? The Black Lives Matter movement started. The Black Lives Matter movement got going. BLM took off. And there started being Black Lives Matter protests and demonstrations all across the country. Can I just find a picture that I can show? My goodness. All right, so the Black Lives Matter uprising happened. And, you know, for years, I'd been going to protests around police brutality. You know, I'd been involved in police brutality struggles in Cleveland. I had been, for years, I'd been involved in police brutality protests, and there were people in the Black community who followed that issue, and there were people in communist groups, the Revolutionary Communist Party in particular, really dedicated themselves to, the issue of police brutality. But suddenly, randomly, social media decided that opposing police brutality was cool, right? All of a sudden, all the government institutions and all the institutions that had ignored the issue of police brutality and racism for so many years, suddenly they were talking about it, right? And suddenly all the normies, the same people who told me that police brutality was made up, that it didn't happen, that they had an uncle who was a cop and he said it didn't happen, all of a sudden, Black Lives Matter takes off. And the FBI is promoting Black Lives Matter. And the FBI is saying, oh, yeah, we love Black Lives Matter. And the CIA is loving Black Lives Matter. And the narrative suddenly changes. And there's movies about Fred Hampton that are out in the theaters. And now the argument is, oh, yes, the FBI did those things, but that's when it was run by bad people, Trump supporters. And how does that make any fucking sense, right? But somehow, the narrative is now, well, sure, the FBI did it back then because they were targeting Black activists, and Black activists are people that the government likes now. So back then, the government was run by Trump supporters, but now the government is run by good people. And I'm saying, no, right? I mean, and it's like utterly infuriating, right? the Black Panthers were tankies. The Black Panthers were tankies, right? This is the Black Panther Party waving Mao's Red Book around. Mao's Little Red Book was required reading in the Black Panther Party, right? All the people that are talking about foreign subversion, people with ties to authoritarian regimes, the Black Panthers waved around Mao's Little Red Book. They made money. That was one of the main ways they fundraised, was by selling Mao's Little Red Book. So I don't know what these people are talking about, right? I mean, here's another Black Panther rally where they've got Mao's Little Red Book. They admired China. I've read to you all in these streams before from the writings of Huey Newton, and about China and about his visits to China, right? Here's another Black Panther rally, right? All these people that are mad about, oh, we can't have Russian influence and we can't have Chinese influence. Like, this is Black Panther rally. They're waving Mao's Little Red Book around, for Christ's sakes, right? The Black Panthers particularly liked North Korea. Did you know that? The Black Panthers were big admirers of North Korea. This is a cover of the Black Panther newspaper. Let me see if I can put it on the screen here. All right, will it let me put this on the screen? Yes, it will. It's not very big, but we'll see if I can get it on the screen here. Hold on. All right, the Black Panthers were admirers of Kim Il-sung and North Korea. All right, this is Eldridge Cleaver. Right? That's the Black Panther newspaper for 25 cents, Eldridge Cleaver, and 3 images of Kim Il-sung. Right? They were absolutely supporters of hardline communist governments. That's what they were all about. Here's another picture of the Black Panther newspaper. Let's see if I can get this one to open up. Oh, nope, that one's not going to open up. But yeah, I mean, the Black Panthers were tankies. The Black Panthers were hardline Marxist-Leninists. They were big believers in hardline Marxist communism. All right, here's another copy of the official Black Panther newspaper. All right, here's another picture of the official Black Panther newspaper. And the Black Lives Matter movement, that's the Black Panther newspaper, Kim Il-sung, Ho Chi Minh, and Mao Zedong on the front cover there. The Black Lives Matter movement, it's promoted by liberals. It idealizes the Black Panthers and it promotes them, and it's got films about them and documentaries, and it talks about how great they are. But somehow the idea that the FBI might frame up innocent people or have agents provocateur, the idea that the FBI might engage in actions against people, or the idea that people that are sympathizers with anti-imperialist governments like China and North Vietnam and North Korea are not bad people. It doesn't occur to these people. And now we've got a situation where Ray Epps very clearly got special treatment. And according to court documents, he did cooperate with law enforcement on January 6th, and especially afterwards. He did cooperate with the FBI. They only wanted him to get 6 months, and now they gave him nothing. They gave him only a year of probation. At this point, it's blatantly obvious this guy was an FBI agent. But what is these people's response? Well, that's a conspiracy theory. How is it a conspiracy theory? It was in the court documents. But when I Google it, it says it's a conspiracy theory. Yeah, well, that's because Google and the tech monopolies are in bed with the government. I mean, I really don't understand this, right? At the very moment that a group of Black revolutionaries, the Uhuru Three, have been indicted for allegedly being Russian agents, these people can't get through their heads that thinking the FBI isn't good is not a conspiracy theory, right? And it is beyond me. It is absolutely beyond me. Liberals are the new conservatives. Liberals are the new neocons. During the Bush years, all those people who I would tell about the crimes of the FBI, and they'd say, well, that can't be true. That must be a conspiracy. That's exactly what the liberals are saying now. It is blatantly obvious that Ray Epps is getting special treatment. It is in his court document that he did cooperate with the FBI on January 6th and afterwards. People got years and years in jail. He didn't. The New York Times and CBS News all did big stories about how the Trumpers ruined his life and all this. And he clearly was. The stories they did were lies. I mean, I am telling you things that are blatantly obvious here. Right? And I find it utterly infuriating to see things that I was talking about when no one else talked about them, right, now be co-opted by people who want to imprison anyone who is anti-imperialist. The Black liberation struggle has always been an anti-imperialist struggle. This is a clip that I put on. I usually put it on every year around MLK Day. And, we do put it on, and, it always gets a lot of views on MLK Day, but it's a little early, but MLK Day is coming up, right? I think, right. Is MLK Day? Yeah, it's usually on the 15th. So it's coming up. But even Dr. Martin Luther King, even though he was kind of manufactured, right? He was a leader that they found who didn't have ties to the communists. But even in his lifetime, he became much more anti-war and anti-imperialist. In his final years of life, he was condemning capitalism, right? This is a clip that I've shown on here many, many times. And this clip makes me angry at conservatives and liberals, both. And I will show this clip on here because it just needs to be shown. It's a 3-minute clip of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In his final years. And I have seen, I'll just tell you some crazy things that I've seen in relation to this clip. But this is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his final years of life. And I mean, this is a clip to send to your family. This is a clip to send to everybody, right? This is Martin Luther King Jr. became a socialist and an anti-imperialist in his final years of life.
Today, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if a man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life nor liberty and the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. Estimated that we spend $322,000 for each enemy we kill in Vietnam, while we spend in the so-called war on poverty in America only about $53 for each person classified as poor. The promises of the Great Society have been shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home. The other thing I want you to understand is this, that it didn't cost the nation 1 penny to integrate lunch counters. It didn't cost the nation 1 penny to guarantee the right to vote. But now we are dealing with issues that cannot be solved without the nation spending billions of dollars and undergoing a radical redistribution of economic power. Yes.
All labor has dignity.
Yes. But you are doing another thing. You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages. America's opportunity to help bridge the gulf between the haves and the have-nots. And the question is whether America will do it. There's nothing new about poverty. What is new is that we now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty. And the real question is whether we have the will.
You know, this clip, I mean, first of all, in the context of this live stream, the important thing here is that, you know, the FBI sent this guy a letter blackmailing him about his sex life and urging him to kill himself. So the FBI that would never send informants into the Capitol, would never like try to frame people up or try to, you know, go after people. They basically did everything they could to destroy this guy's reputation, etc. So that's one thing to point out. The other thing, and this is the other thing, all the hateful, evil things that libertarians and Republicans say about socialists, they're saying about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? All socialists are stupid. All socialists are retarded. All socialists are just like Hitler. So, you know, I hear it, you know, the stupid doctrinaire anti-socialism, anti-communism that I hear from conservatives, all that is directed at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. because he said many times that he favored socialism. He favored what he called a democratic form of socialism. Here, I'll put the quotes on the screen. You know, so all the idiotic anti-communism that we hear, and unfortunately, because we're against the FBI and we're against U.S. wars, because of that, we unfortunately, you know, have to be in conservative circles nowadays because liberals have basically become zombies and liberals have become blind believers in the wars. But unfortunately, among the people we encounter in our conservative circles, there's a lot of idiotic anti-communism. That's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There must be a better distribution of wealth, and maybe America must move toward democratic socialism. Right? That's so if all socialists are evil, Dinesh D'Souza, if all socialists are evil, Tucker Carlson, if all socialists are evil and you have to be an idiot to believe in socialism, all of that, that's who you're talking about right there. Right? You know, I mean, and that is infuriating to me as well. You know, so, I mean, we're in a weird spot politically, but at this point, I mean, the mainstream media has told us that Ray Epps was not an FBI informant, and we now know that he was, and the icing on the cake is that he got no jail time. The FBI is not a friend of the American working people. The FBI was formed as a wing of the Department of Justice, started by J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover was a congressional librarian, and he was a congressional librarian who was very good at giving fiery anti-communist speeches and stirring up members of Congress to be very afraid of the Bolshevik Revolution. They gave him his own wing of the Department of Justice called the Bureau of Investigation, eventually became the FBI, and it was his own little kingdom. And the FBI did weird things, like they had comic books about J. Edgar Hoover that they distributed. They had radio programs about J. Edgar Hoover where he was the hero. They tried to promote him on a personal level, which was a little bit weird for a government agency to do. They viciously went after the Communist Party during the 1950s. They then went after the Black Liberation Struggle. And the FBI is very, very much an organization that was founded on the basis of anti-communism, anti-working class politics, opposing the anti-racist movement, and I mean, there's no question about it. And I mean, one of the early acts of the FBI in their early years was they tried to pay the first black heavyweight champion of the world. They tried to pay him, the first heavyweight boxing champion who was black, Jack Johnson. They tried to pay him to throw the fight. And the reason was that they were afraid that if black Americans saw a black man become the heavyweight champion of the world, they would rise up and revolt against white people. And so as a matter of national security, they tried their hardest to convince Jack Johnson to throw the fight. Right. And we're supposed to think that's not the same FBI anymore. Right. And that's when the FBI was led by Trump supporters. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. You say this to people and they're like, well, no, that can't be the case. I mean, and it's like these people, they don't realize Mao was a friend of the Black Panthers. Kim Il-sung was a friend of the Black Panthers. The Soviet Union was a friend of the Black Panthers, not the American government. And what they're saying about Donald Trump, that he's not excited about fighting Russia. He's not excited about fighting China, that he praises Kim Jong-un. That's the same shit they said about the Black Panthers, right? The American government has always been against people that are organizing for justice. American imperialism is the enemy of all people that are struggling for truth and justice in this world. That's why the United States government is protecting Israel right now as they bomb and murder Palestinians. And the whole world is saying, how can you do this? But at the UN Security Council, the USA just will not let Israel get any criticism, will not let anyone get in Israel's way. That's why the U.S. government has already attacked 3 Yemeni ships, and they're talking about moving their military in there to make sure that Israel can make money. I'm just telling you, this idea that we should support the American government. And let me repeat also, what I find so frustrating about this media literacy bullshit. There is fake news out there. There are things out there that are not true. But whether or not something is true has nothing to do with who said it. Hitler was an awful, murdering human being, but I can guarantee you that there was probably a day in Hitler's life where he looked up at the sky and he said the sky was blue, and the sky was actually blue. And if you wanted to, you could say, Caleb, is the sky blue? And I could say, yeah. And they could say, well, that's what Hitler said. And maybe that is what Hitler said. But when Hitler said the sky was blue, he was stating a fact. And that fact was true, even regardless of the fact that Hitler said it. Right? And there's many examples of this. The arguments that these people make is that certain ideas, certain information has to be suppressed, not because it's not true, but because it undermines faith in our democratic institutions. So it might be 100% true, but it might make you not like the FBI. Might be 100% true, but it might make you not like the CIA. Might be 100% true, but it might undermine faith. And it's like, I want to slap people who say these things. NewsGuard, the media literacy classes they're giving kids in school, the hysteria against RT, the hysteria against alternative media, all of this is nothing but classic don't question authority, believe the American government. That's all it is, right? If you see something, your question should be, is it true? And if it's true, that's something you need to recognize. And if it's not true, that's something that you should be suspicious of. But your question shouldn't be, is this something that might lead me to think wrong? And that's the way they're trying to train you to think. Not is something true or not, but is this something that might lead me to think heretical thoughts? And these are the same people that are always lecturing us about cults and mind control and totalitarianism. But they literally have created a whole apparatus where there's all kinds of people that you can show the Ray Epps document to. You can show that Ray Epps was an FBI informant. And they'll say, but that's what bad people do. And that would lead me to possibly think that maybe Trump was unfairly treated. And I can't think that, or else I would be a bad person. So I just have to pretend that's not true. And that is, ugh. You know, folks, I'll tell you, it took me so long to get back to God, so long to be religious, because I grew up around people that were religious in very, 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 very stupid ways. Right? And, you know, I grew up around people for whom religion was that be very angry at religion because it was the same kind of thing. I've told this story before. I will tell it again. I remember, it's funny because I don't drink now as an adult, but anyway, it's a funny story. But I remember I was sitting in math class. I think it was my freshman year of high school. And I was sitting in math class, and I was sitting next to a girl at my school who was deeply, deeply conservative and religious. She wore skirts down to her ankles every day, very conservative. We were talking before class. And I said that when I get to be 21 years old, I'm going to drink alcohol. I'm not going to get drunk, but I'm going to drink. And she said I shouldn't do that. You can't do that. No, drinking is wrong. It's just so wrong. You can't do that. And I said, well, I can't do it now because I'm underage. It's not legal. But when I get to be 21 years old, I'm going to drink alcohol, I said. And she said, well, you can't do that. You can't do that. It's a sin. The Bible says you can't drink. And I said, then why was Jesus's first miracle turning water into wine? I asked her. And she said to me, well, actually, it wasn't wine. It was grape juice. It was actually just grape juice. And I said to her, what do you mean it was grape juice? And she said, well, they thought it was wine, but it was grape juice. And I said to her, well, there were no refrigerators back then. There was no pasteurization back then. How did they keep the grape juice from fermenting and turning into alcohol? You know, fair question, isn't it? And then she started crying. She just started crying in that moment. So I was just like, oh shit. You know, you never want to be the guy who makes a woman cry, right? No matter what you said, no matter how right you are, no matter how wrong she is, if you're, you know, women, if you ever want to win an argument and you're in a public place, just start crying. The guy will, everyone look around will immediately look at the guy and say, what a bad person he is, right? So just, that's a secret, women. If you ever want to win an argument, start crying. If you ever want to win an argument in a public place, start crying. And so I was just like, oh shit. So obviously I stopped, right? She just started crying. So then the next day, I remember before class was supposed to start, my math teacher took me aside and said, Caleb, you need to start respecting, you need to not be disrespecting other people's religions. And I had to sit on the other side of the room. I look back on that moment and I thought, what in the world is wrong with her? And the fact that I'm simply pointing out that according to the Bible, Jesus' first miracle is turning water into wine. And then she says it's actually grape juice. And I point out that's not possible. And she's so fragile. Like, oh my God, that might lead me to not think that maybe what my parents told me or what my church told me might not be true. And that's so threatening to me. I'm so scared of possibly questioning what the authority figures in my life told me. I'm going to break down and start crying in response to that. You know, and I mean, it's just like, it was stuff like that made it very, very hard for me to be religious because I associated religion with that level of stupid. I mean, you know, look, if every time somebody disagreed with me about something, I had a breakdown, it's like this fragility. that's like, must not think, right? Shit, folks. I mean, you know who I see it now from more than anybody? It's more snowflake than snowflake. Exactly. Zionists. Zionists are all, I see them. Oh my God, there was somebody with a pro-Palestine sign at my college. I'm triggered. You know how many, I work at RT. You know how many fucking Ukraine flags I see? Do you see me breaking down and crying about it? You know, I mean, it's like, what the fuck? Right? People disagree with you. Get over it. But it's these people that it's like their beliefs are so shallow and they're so scared of having to engage and having to actually think about anything. They just want to obey. It infuriates me. It really, really does. And it's these same people that just can't admit that Ray Epps might be an informant. You know, you could hate Donald Trump. You could even think, you could even accept the standard narrative of January 6th, but say, you know what, that guy Ray Epps, he was probably an informant, because that's, I mean, he pretty clearly was at this point. You could be the most, you could accept the most standard narrative and be like, and yeah, the FBI, they needed to monitor those protests. Ray Epps didn't make, you know, he was there, you know, but even that, entertaining that reality is so threatening to some people. The idea that there might be ideas other than what they already believe that are a problem. The idea that I mean, it is just infuriating to me that when I meet people like this, and I see that it's the liberals that do this now. It used to be conservatives who did this. I couldn't stand them, but now it's mainly liberals. Right? Ray Epps is not an FBI informant, because our FBI would never do such a bad thing, Caleb. Our FBI doesn't do bad things. And if our FBI, did, bad things, that might lead me to question our loyal democratic institutions. And so that can't be the case. And because of that, oh gosh. I just, I really, really get frustrated by it. And when people are saying, well, I'm going to not acknowledge true things because they sound like what a bad person would say, or you got to just trust the government and trust authority. It's like, it's infuriating to me. And especially when it's people that, you're wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. Do you think that the American government didn't call Martin Luther King Jr. a Soviet agent? Do you think the American government didn't call Martin Luther King Jr. a communist and a traitor spreading disinformation for the Russians? Like, this is, and then, no, all these this like fake woke shit has hijacked stuff that I have studied and all of that. And people with the very same mindset that I've struggled against, people blindly following, are now, oh, they've got a picture of Fred Hampton on. They got a t-shirt with Fred Hampton on while they're telling me the FBI would never do anything bad, right? They got a t-shirt of Fred Hampton. Vosh is on his streams all the time. Oh, I love the Black Panthers. Oh, anyone who supports North Korea is the same as a Nazi. Well, the Black Panthers supported North Korea, you fucking idiot. Oh, I love the Black Panthers, but anyone who supports Mao in China is the same as a Nazi. Well, the Black Panthers had Mao's Red Book as required reading, you fucking idiot. It's like, it's beyond me. It's really beyond me. It's really, really beyond me to see this. I'm here standing up for truth. I'm here standing up for justice. I'm here arguing that, we need a new society in America where the banks and the factories and the industries are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a few. That we ought to rebuild this country with our resources instead of bombing countries all over the world. That our real enemy is in the Pentagon. It's on Wall Street. It's in London. It's not the Houthis. It's not the Iranians. It's not the Cubans, the Venezuelans, the Russians, the Chinese. I'm here arguing for what communists have always argued, right? That the working class, the bulk, the majority of this country, that we have no interest in helping Wall Street dominate the world, and that life would get much better for us if we had an America that was part of the new emerging economy centered around Russia and China. If we had a relationship with the rest of the world that was based on fair trade and cooperation, where we were teaming up with other countries to have great scientific breakthroughs. You know, I'm just arguing for what communists in this country have always argued, that the rule of profits and the power of the big monopolies is not in the country's interest. We need a society where the people come first and human needs come over profits, right? Human need is prioritized over the profits of a wealthy few. That we need a planned economy where the centers of economic power, the major centers of economic power, are organized to serve public good and not simply operating for the profits of those who own them. And if we had that, the country would be much happier. There would be much less conflict and instability. There'd be, a rising standard of living. There'd be education for all and healthcare for all. And that this global system of monopoly capitalism, imperialism, is not good for the people of the world. That's what I'm arguing. Pretty standard stuff. And it's the kind of thing the FBI used to kill people for saying, and still does. It's the kind of things that the Uhuru 3 are on trial on, are potentially being put in jail for being Russian agents for allegedly saying. It's the kind of things that Martin Luther King Jr. said before he was killed. It's the kind of things that, that Eugene Debs said and was thrown into prison during World War I for saying, right? The idea that people should come before profits, the idea that we could have a better society if the wealth served the people. I mean, this is pretty basic stuff, And seeing the left lose their mind, seeing the right wake up, but still have all this confused ideological baggage and still think communism is the problem. And we just have to do our own thing. That's really all we can do. We have a unique message. We are anti-imperialists. We are the U.S. division of the global axis of resistance. And we have a unique message. We don't love the FBI. We don't love COINTELPRO. We don't love the Pentagon. We love America. We love the working people of this country, and we love the people of the world. That's our message, folks. It's funny. I went and worked out today. And because it's funny, I when I work out, I guess I'm more tired. And so when I come on these streams, I'm a little more agitated. But, hey, conflict is what gives life meaning, right? Conflict is what gives us purpose. So I hate to be a little negative. I can be a little negative sometimes. But that's my thoughts in light of today's ruling that Ray Epps gets no jail time. Those are my thoughts. So there you go, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? I will call you all out as I see you. Mark Jones in Utica, New York is with us. Very, very good. Very, very good. Rice from Adelaide, Australia is with us. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Chris in Salt Lake City. Ryan in Kansas City. Nicholas in Miami. Matt in Baltimore. Boston, New York. Noah Shank. Bob Troy, New York. Patch in Arizona. Battle Cossack Gonzalo. Steve in Boston. Neil Frazier in Hong Kong. Balthazar in Oakland. Denver from Minnesota. Joe in Los Angeles, John McCarthy in Chicago, David in San Jose, California, Bosnia, Argentina, Pablo E., Alex from Brazil, Jamie from St. Paul, Steve and Ann in Ringgold, Georgia, Nico from San Diego, right? Edward in Louisville, Kentucky. Not in jail, at least, says Richard Sawaki. Isabel in Toronto. Ellie in Chicago. Jorge Vlad in Chicago. Welcome, Jorge Vlad. Kieran from San Diego. Welcome, Kieran from San Diego. Good times. Good times. On the Rockfin. Who's on the Rockfin? We got Hempcar. Jacob. He's sent me a couple Rumble or Rockfin tips. We got anyone on the Rumble? Oh, on the Rumble. All right. Anoan asked a question on the Anoan is back from Mars, he said. And he sent a Rumble rant. Eric in Holland, Lockport, work in progress in Ottawa, Andrew in Argentina. Welcome, Andrew. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Good times. All right. So we have 4 super chats here. They're all appreciated, of course. But you know, more super chats are always appreciated. So are Rumble Rants and so are Rockfin Tips. You know, give me something to talk about here. We're entering the second half of the show. So keep me talking. Give me stuff to react to. So give me something to talk about. That's my suggestion. Now is the time to send your super chat. So first we will do Rockfin Tips, because that's generally, you know, Rockfin or Rumble Rants we do first, and then Rockfin Tips, and then super chats. So super chatters, you've still got time. We got 4 super chats, but keep them coming. First super chat is great coverage on the coming election on RT. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad I was able to do that report. You know, it feels good to be out in the field reporting. It feels good to go out and do a package reporting on the street. It really, really does feel good. You know, one thing I'm not sure if I'm going to do this or not. I'll just mention that. I'll answer the rest of your Rumble rant, but since there's not many super chats that have come in, I'll just throw this out there. Right? There are a lot of people on the internet who seem to think I don't work at RT anymore. I have worked at RT nonstop since 2016. At no point was I ever fired from RT. You know, RT America shut down, but I was always an RT International reporter. You know, I did some work here and there with RT America. I worked out of their office. I used their cameramen, but I was always an RT International reporter. I never stopped working for RT. I work from home now. We don't have a studio anymore, but I've always been working for RT, you know? And so I keep seeing, though, you know, places on the internet, podcasts, all kinds of places where people say Caleb got fired from RT. No, I didn't. You know, and you know, the fact that people could get something that obvious wrong, right? Because look at my Facebook, look at my Twitter, I'm all over RT all the time. Shows you they really don't know anything about me, right? You know, I mean, at no point have I not been working for RT. And that makes me think that since people get facts that blatantly wrong, I may want to go back and do some debunking of some of these people's smears. Though I don't want to rehash every bit of drama that's ever been out there. But when people get things that are that blatantly wrong, it may be useful to point that out to people, because look, the memo that's been sent out about me is just so obviously false on so many levels. Right? I am not a white supremacist. I've been doing anti-racist activism my whole life. I'm married to someone who's not white. I mean, it's like, give me a break, you know, but these people who get this like surface level understanding of who I am, they have absolutely no understanding. And there's these videos that have been made that get hundreds of thousands of views that just explain to everybody, well, actually, Caleb is a neo-Nazi, and they don't tell you anything about who I am. Right. You know, and I mean, it may be worth, you know, debunking some of the stupider claims, especially when certain people are taking a break from things or out of the picture, but we shall see. I got to be strategic about it, right? Because, you know, we don't want to jump into, you know, opening the door of drama again. We got to be careful. But anyway, so Unknown says, in addition to thanking me for my RT coverage, right? Thoughts on religious indoctrination. I noticed people subjected to this tend to be insecure as they grow up. Well, I don't know. Look, an important thing to remember is that religion in America greatly changed as a result of the religious right of the 1970s, right? And I've got whole live streams where I talk about that history, right? The religious right of the that emerged in the mid 1970s, late 1970s with the moral majority and Jerry Falwell. Oh, Gabby's in Chicago. Don't worry. You know, that religious right is not representative of American religion, right? We have always had a very deeply religious culture here in the United States, but starting in the late 70s, the mega church culture, you can call it, the mega church stuff, the evangelical stuff of the late 70s, starting in the 80s, 90s, kind of culminating, the climax of it was the Bush years. And after that, it started losing power. That stuff is not representative of religion in American history. And I mean, it's not, right? John Brown, right? The great radical abolitionist John Brown was a Christian. The Second Great Awakening was this mass spiritual movement opposing slavery. Christian socialism has always been a part of Christianity in America, right? There was a Christian socialist community called New Harmony in Indiana, and the leader of it was invited. Robert Owen gave testimony before Congress, and that yes, we are a deeply religious country, but the religious right, is not representative. One thing that always annoyed me about the religious right, right? I grew up in a church. I was confirmed. I studied the Bible. And one thing that always annoyed me about the religious right is I would ask them, about their religious beliefs, and they would say to me, I just believe the Bible. I just believe the Bible, man. And it was always this like hippie thing. It was weird because they were like the most right-wing, militaristic, conservative people, but suddenly they turn into this weird, it's the 1960s hippie stuff kind of co-opted. I just believe the Bible, man. I just believe the Bible. And it's like, yeah, most Christianity, pretty much all Christianity draws from the Bible, but there are many different interpretations of the Bible. There are many, many, many different interpretations of the Bible. They're like, I just believe the Bible, man. No, you don't just believe the Bible. You believe one interpretation of the Bible, and I'm trying to find out what that is. So you're not being helpful in this conversation when you're just like, no, man, I just believe the Bible. It's like, okay, well, Catholics think they believe the Bible. Every form of Protestantism, Orthodox people, they all think they believe the Bible, but they all have very different conclusions about it. So if you tell me you just believe the Bible, man, you're not being helpful, right? And that is not representative, right? If you talked to a fundamental Baptist in the 1950s, they wouldn't just say, I just believe the Bible, man. They wouldn't say that, right? They'd be like, yes, we believe the King James Bible is the word of God. We believe, right? If you talked to deeply religious people throughout American history, they didn't talk that way, right? The evangelical Christian right, the 1980s and 90s and culminating in the Bush years, that stuff was a unique form of, it's stupid. I don't know any other way to put it. It's just stupid. It's Christianity for dummies, right? It is deeply emotional. They amp up the loud rock music and they just believe the Bible, man. And you start crying and you're emotional and that's it. And it's not smart. It ain't intelligent. It's not smart. It's not well thought out. It's just, unhinged emotion. And, I don't know. It's not helpful. And that stuff is what, got people to be fanatical supporters of George W. Bush and support the U.S. invasion of Iraq, etc. And, I think part of what made it hard for me to come back to religion was I associated religion with all of that stuff, right? I associated that kind of thinking with all religion, and that stuff is not representative of all religion. It's not. That's representative of one particular brand of Protestantism that was really amped up by Israel and the U.S. neoconservative right wing for political purposes in the late 70s, and had a lot of political power. The Mike Pence stuff, that doesn't represent all Christianity. And so I think that's my response to your question on Owen. So now I'm going to go, and there's been a couple more that have come in. Hempcar has sent in a lot of Rockfin tips. And so he sent in 3 of them. So I'm going to have to answer 3 of his. Hempcar is on Rockfin. And on Rockfin, Hempcar said, communism forgets that life is individual. Capitalism forgets that life is social, and the kingdom of brotherhood is found neither in the thesis of communism nor the antithesis of capitalism, but in the higher synthesis. It is found in a higher synthesis that combines the truths of both. Martin Luther King, his last banned sermon was Why America May Go to Hell. Well, I don't agree with that. Right? What I don't agree with is I think that Marxism has this dialectical view. And that's just not representative of Marxism. It doesn't recognize the individual. It absolutely does. Marx thought that capitalism was a great advance over feudalism, the individual rights, the breaking down of the feudal hierarchies, and that socialism, he thought, would bring a higher level of individual fulfillment, right? Where the individual development of all would be of one would be the individual development of all. And communism would bring the ultimate level of freedom where there's no compulsion, no coercion, right? So I think MLK, I understand why he might have said that, based on observing the Soviet Union and how authoritarian it was out of necessity, and based on, the perception that he had. But I don't think that's representative of Marxism, right? Marxism does understand the role of the individual, but it views the role of individualism as tied in with the economy. No one anywhere in the world talked about freedom of speech or freedom of assembly until like the 1400s in Europe. Why was that? Were people just bad until then? They were just bad people. No one recognized human rights until then. But then magically John Locke was born and he said, hey, we should all have free speech. And then we had it. Of course not. This is tied to the economic foundations of society. And as we move toward a higher plane of economics, the level of individual freedom expands. Right. And the more prosperous a society is, the more stable a society is, the more freedom you get. In the third world, you're going to have a high level of authoritarianism and corruption. You go to any third world country, they say, never call the police, no matter what, because the police are going to show up and they're going to want to bribe. And, and they're not going to help you. Right. And if they can't get a bribe, they're going to make something up. And and that's how it is in most of the developing world. Why are people in the developing world just bad? No, because that's where their societies are at this time, right? In terms of development, they talk about corruption in various countries, in anti-imperialist and pro-imperialist countries. There's a lot of corruption. People hand out the goods to their neighbors and their relatives and stuff. Why? Because they're struggling to survive, and that there is this idealism that thinks that, the United States is great because we just decided people should have freedom. And it's like, no, I mean, there was the level of freedom that we have in the United States right now. First of all, for most of American history, we didn't have that. And it's much less than it used to be. Right. I mean, and that freedom in any society is directly linked to the amount of stability in society, the amount of wealth in the society, the level of development, and that when people separate those things and they make it a moral question, they're missing the point. So that's my response to that. MLK said, what do the Vietnamese think of us when we test out our weapons on them as the Germans did? He said that we're backing Generation Kentucky, who said was the greatest hero. Yes, in the Beyond Vietnam speech, he said a lot of those things. And then he said, have you read anything by Robert David Steele? I heard him say Bill Binney will force the NSA to Truth and Reconciliation table. He was a Marine and intelligence officer. Wired magazine praised him. He said some interesting stuff. I'm not familiar with Mr. Steele's work. I'm not familiar with Robert David Steele. Oh, and another one, Ellie Marino. To your point about the Christian right, I also noticed in Spanish, English, they would respond, I'm Christian, when I asked about their faith. I used to just mess with them by playing dumb. Oh, you mean you're Catholic, Episcopal, or Eastern Orthodox? Well, Ellie, that was another pet peeve I would have. And this was a frequent one growing up that I would get, right? As people would say, are you Catholic or Christian? And I would point out to people, Catholicism is a form of Christianity. And these people would not know, they would not know that, right? It's one thing if you think that Catholics are not real Christians, right? I respect that as a religious position, but they consider themselves to be Christian. And these people that were just, it was infuriating. And they would be like, are you Catholic or Christian? And I would say to them, well, Catholicism is a form of Christianity. No, it's not. It's like they worship Mary and they're not, I'm like, they think they are. I'm like, no, they don't. Like, it's more pagan. And blah, blah. I'm like, that's what your church thinks, but they consider themselves to be Christian. They think your Christianity is wrong. And these people didn't even realize that. And it was like infuriating to me. It was utterly infuriating to me. And I'd be like, are they Catholic or Christian? Duh! It's like, it'd be like, I'd walk up to you. Are you a Trotskyite or a communist? Well, Trotskyites think they're communists. Now, I think that they're wrong, but they think they're communists. Are you a communist or a Maoist? Are you a communist or a Marxist Lenin? I mean, it's dumb, right? And it just, again, it's this whole thing of like, they don't really know what they're talking about. I would get very frustrated, Ellie. I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's very frustrating to me. One argument I've actually reflected on, it was with the same young woman that started crying over the water into wine thing. I remember at one point, she said that the Roman Catholic Church crucified Jesus. And I said, no, they did not. No, they did not. That the Roman Empire existed. But she said, yeah, but it's Roman Catholic, and that's who crucified Jesus. I'm like, no. And we had this argument. And then I said, you do realize all Christianity originates with Roman Catholicism. And she said, no, it didn't. No, it didn't. There's always been Baptists. We've always been around, she said. And I said, no, you haven't. Like, the original church was based in Rome. Eventually there were different breakaways. And she said, no, there's always been Baptists. And actually, and this is interesting to me, that part of the argument is actually based on some parts of fundamental Baptist theology. That fundamental Baptists claim that they always existed because they go through the history of Catholicism and the Orthodox Church, and they find various heretics. You were right, M Series. They do say that. They find various heretics who were burned at the stake, and they find things that they said that they agree with. And based on that, they argue that they've always existed, which is a very, very strange trick that they play. And it's based on, I used to talk to one of my friends who was an Orthodox Christian in upstate New York. I mean, they blatantly distort, in a lot of cases, what these various heretics that were burned by the Catholic state church believed. But they go through the history of the Catholic Church and they claim the various heretics, the Gnostics and others, as their own, and that's their basis of claiming that they never broke with Catholicism. So that was a little more sophisticated version of that argument, Ellie. But it is a very annoying one. It's a very, very annoying. When people say, "Are they Catholic or Christian?" I'd be like, "Stop, right? Just stop, right?" It's like, okay, I understand it is your position that Catholicism is not a form of Christianity. I understand that. But if you go around saying, are they Catholic or Christian, you sound dumb, and these people would not even realize that Catholics considered themselves to be Christian. They wouldn't realize that. And that, that I just found to be like, how can you not know that the Catholic Church consider themselves to be Christian? But anyway, so that answers the Rockfin questions. Hope it was helpful. All right. So now I'm entering the super chat area. ISIS condemns Hamas and Iran. Will they go to war with them? Well, ISIS murdered like 80 Iranians the other day, right? And ISIS has always hated Iran. It's called them Shia apostates. Now, Hamas, why don't they like Hamas? Now, I mean, Hamas, now, to be fair, okay, so it's weird. You got ISIS, you got Hamas, and you got Iran. Those are three different wings of the global Islamic movement, right? I mean, so Iran are Shia Muslims. They come out of the Islamic Revolution, 1979. They're Shia Muslims, and they represent, the axis of resistance. Hezbollah in Lebanon. You've got you've got the secular Syrian government. You've got the Houthis in Yemen that are a different kind of Shia. They're Zaidi Shias. You've got the Bahrain Shia movement. There's a whole wing of forces that are aligned with Iran in the Middle East. They are the anti-imperialists, right? They are the anti-imperialists. And anyone who wants to tell you they're not doesn't know what they're talking about. So you got the anti-imperialist forces, the Syrian Arab Republic, Hezbollah, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Houthis, the Bahrain independence movement, etc. Right? So then you've got what they call westernized Islam. And that's what Hamas comes out of, right? It's the Muslim Brotherhood. There was a cleric in Egypt, I forget what his name was, and he developed his own interpretation. He was a Sunni, but he argued that capitalism and the free market and Islam walk hand in hand. However, if everyone was just a good Muslim, there would be no problem with capitalism. The problem with capitalism is that that people are not following the Quran, and they need to have programs that are administered not by the state but by Islamic organizations to care for poor people, and that Western technology can be embraced, Western forms of government can be embraced, and that nationalism of any kind is bad, that you need a government that is Islamic, and that you shouldn't be organizing for the Arab people or the Turkish people or the Kurdish people or the Persian. It's on the basis of Islam, and that's westernized Islam. That's the Muslim Brotherhood, and that's the brand of Islam promoted by Qatar and Turkey, and they promote brotherhoodism. And it started in Egypt, right? It was a religious movement. It started in Egypt in the 1920s. And it actually, the guy came to the United States. The guy, who founded it, I forget his name, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. He came to the United States and he saw lawns. Founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. What was his name? And he saw how Americans mow their lawns. And he was just blown away by it. Right. Yeah. Hassan al-Banna, right, was the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was just this Islamic cleric scholar in Egypt. He was really impressed with the United States and the fact that it was, he thought the United States was great and the West was great, and he really hated communism. He thought communism was the greatest threat. And from what I understand, he also had some ties to the Nazis. He was a Nazi sympathizer, right, in a lot of ways, because he hated communism so much. And that's the Muslim Brotherhood, right? And the Muslim Brotherhood, Egypt is where they started. And then the CIA started funding them to fight Abdel Nasser. Abdel Nasser was the Arab nationalist and socialist president of Egypt, the founder of Arab socialism, Abdel Nasser. And Abdel Nasser, he was this socialist leader in Egypt that was, building up state-run industries, and he built a huge power plant in coordination with the Soviet Union, and he was a pro-communist leader, Abdel Nasser. And so the CIA didn't like him, and so they started funding the Muslim Brotherhood as a way to fight Abdel Nasser. And so the Muslim Brotherhood, it really expanded throughout the Middle East during the 1950s and 60s and 70s because it was known to be a CIA, Western intelligence-linked wing of Islam. And that's Hamas. Hamas started out as the Palestinian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. We know that Israel gave it covert support because the main form of resistance to Israel was communist-led, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So Israel in like the 80s was giving them covert support, and Hamas, is now the main current in Gaza. They won the elections in 2006 in Gaza, and that they are the government of Gaza at this point, Hamas. They started out as the Palestinian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. And they are the main entity. And they are from the tradition of the Muslim Brotherhood. They're no longer affiliated. They cut ties with the Muslim Brotherhood. And Muslim Brotherhood style Islam has gone in all kinds of different directions. Erdogan, the president of Turkey, he comes out of that tradition. But then his teacher, right, the scholar, who taught Erdogan, and that Erdogan followed this Islamic teacher named Gulen, and Gulen tried to overthrow Erdogan, and now lives in Pennsylvania. And I visited his compound. RT sent me to his compound, and I actually saw Gulen, right? The USA basically helped Gulen, and I've met Gulen. I'll show you the picture of me and Gulen. This is me and Gulen, because after the attempted coup in Egypt in 2016, Gulen wanted everyone to know that he was still alive. And so RT sent me to his compound in Pennsylvania, and I met Gulen. This is me and Gulen, right? This is me and Gulen. I met Gulen in 2016 for RT. And they wanted all the reporters there, Chinese TV and Russian TV and CNN and all of that. They wanted us all to get our pictures taken with Gulen because Gulen wanted everyone to know that he was still alive. So I got to meet Gulen. That is me with Gulen. And he did not give me an interview. And the first reporter who went up tried to shake his hand, and then his team shouted, "No handshakes, no handshakes." I did not shake his hand. There were no handshakes, but that is me and Gulen. I have met Gulen, right? That's me and the one of the main Turkish scholars of what they call Westernized Islam or Brotherhood Islam, right? And I got to tell you, his compound is a spooky place. It is a spooky place, right? It's like you would never guess this place was where it was, right? You're driving through the woods in Pennsylvania and you drive past, there's like a billboard for a haunted house or something. And then you get a little bit closer and all of a sudden there's armed guards and huge fences and you go through, you talk to the armed guards who look in your trunk and all of that. And then you get in there and all of a sudden it's like you're in the Middle East, right? And they got all these buildings with elevators in them, with fucking elevators in them, right? They're like houses. They're like 1 or 2 story houses. They got elevators in them. And you get in the elevator. And as the elevator's going, it starts playing, the Quran, it's blasting the Quran and the call to prayer. And it's only men, no women are allowed at his compound. There's all these men walking around with beads doing the Islamic prayer thing. And you'd think you're in the middle of the Middle East, but you're in Pennsylvania. It's very, very weird. And that's Gulen. That's Gulen. And I met Gulen in 2016. That's me and Gulen. All right. RT sent me to interview Gulen, and that happened. So that's Westernized Islam, and that's what Hamas comes out of. So then, on top of that, ISIS are Wahhabis. And Wahhabi Islam, that is the ideology of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, right, it was started, it was the House of Saud, was the monarchy, but there was an Islamic scholar, Wahhab, right? And he had this interpretation of Islam. It says you have to do everything exactly as the Prophet did it, right? They talk about Salafiism, right? Where they eat with 3 fingers because it's taught in some of the hadiths that the Prophet Muhammad ate with only 3 fingers. So they eat with only 3 fingers because the Prophet Muhammad did. They are what they call Salafis or Takfiris or Wahhabis. And that's what ISIS is. That's what bin Laden is. That's the ideology of Saudi Arabia. And it goes back pretty far. I mean, it goes back to like the 1600s. But whenever the House of Saud was setting up on the Arabian Peninsula, the House of Saud, their ideology was a very, very conservative brand of Islam that taught, that you have to have an absolute monarchy. You have to have an absolute monarchy because the caliphate wasn't an absolute monarchy. And you have to govern exactly the way that, that they did. And you have to have a government that is exactly as the Prophet had his government. That's what their teaching is, right? The Salafi or Wahhabi interpretation comes out of Saudi Arabia. It got promoted largely in the 1970s or late in the 1980s, really, because of Osama bin Laden. Because Osama bin Laden was a wealthy heir. I mean, he's not from the royal family, but his family has a state monopoly on construction. Bin Laden Construction Company is like the only construction company that's legal in Saudi Arabia. They have like a monopoly on construction. It's a billionaire family. They do all the construction in Saudi Arabia. And one of the heirs to the bin Laden fortune, he was a religious fanatic. And the CIA and Brzezinski grabbed him and sent him to Afghanistan to fight the Soviet Union, right? Right? And Osama bin Laden went to the Soviet Union, to fight against the communists, right? And Brzezinski basically mobilized this army of Wahhabis and helped, the Saudi government, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Osama bin Laden to build this army of Wahhabis to fight the Soviet Union. So to fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, Saudis were tapped to do that, and Saudi Wahhabi ideology started spreading throughout the Muslim world in the 1970s with the support of the United States government, because they saw it as an alternative to communism, right? Communism was the main form of resistance to American imperialism at that time, and they were promoting that. They promoted the Westernized Islam stuff in the 50s and 60s, but starting in the late 70s, early 80s, they started really promoting Wahhabism. And Wahhabism, spread its influence throughout the world, right? And that's Wahhabism. So those are really, when you talk about Islam, those are the three major currents of Islam that exist. You have the Turkish, Qatari, westernized Islam, the Brotherhood. You have Saudi Wahhabi Islam, and then you have Shia and Axis of Resistance Islam. And those are the three currents of Islam that exist at this time. And when you mention like ISIS, they're Wahhabis. Hamas are westernized. Iran is Shia. So that, your question, ISIS condemns Iran. I guess ISIS condemns Hamas because they're not Wahhabis, but I have not heard about Hamas and ISIS fighting each other. I have heard about Hamas definitely fighting Iran. It's worth noting that among the Palestinians, there is a Shia organization. Hamas is the main organization that is leading Palestinian resistance. However, there is also another group. There's a group called the Islamic Jihad in Palestine, the IJP, and they are a Shia group in Palestine. And they exist. They're not as big as Hamas. They're much, much smaller than Hamas, but they have an armed organization. They have been fighting against Israel, and they are Shia, right? And they're called the Islamic Jihad in Palestine, the IJP. And then there's still the communist groups. The PFLP still exists, right? The communist organization, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. It's very small. It used to be one of the main groups that was fighting Palestine, led by Layla Khalid. Layla Khalid, she was a very famous Palestinian woman who hijacked airplanes, and she was held as a prisoner, and then Israel was like forced to release her. You've probably seen pictures of her before. She's like one of the main like heroes of Palestinian resistance, Layla Khalid, right? Very famous. She's still alive, and she's she's a communist. She's a Marxist Leninist, and you've seen photos of this woman before, I'm sure. Right, I'll put it on the screen. Layla Khalid is her name, right? It's funny because they don't teach you all of this stuff. And when you're first coming around communist stuff, you see a lot of pictures and stuff that you don't know, right? If you weren't alive in the 70s, everybody knew who Layla Khalid was because she was one of the main like people fighting Israel. Israel called her a terrorist, and she was like kind of the symbol of Palestinian resistance to Israel. Layla Khalid. You've seen pictures. You've probably seen that picture before, right? It shows up in a lot of anti-imperialist artwork, right? Layla Khalid hijacked airplanes, and she was a prisoner, and then they let her out, and she ran the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, which is a Marxist-Leninist Palestinian resistance organization. And I believe the guy who started it was George Habash, but he died. Right. And Layla Khalid is still alive. She's still living. I don't know. She's not in Palestine, though. I think she's in another country. I don't know where she lives now, but she's not in Palestine. She's like in exile. She's somewhere else, but I forget where she is, but she's somewhere. And she's, right. She's very well respected at international communist gatherings and stuff. And she is a big supporter of the Palestinians, also a big supporter of the Syrian Arab Republic and Bashar Assad. And she pretty much aligns herself at this point with the Shia Iranian current, even though she's secular, right? I believe she's an atheist, communist atheist. But she does align herself with the anti-imperialist forces in the Middle East. But her organization at this point is very small because communism is not the main form of resistance among the Palestinians anymore, right? So there you go. But yeah, Layla Khalid, the PFLP, and then there's the DFLP, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And they were a bigger group a long time ago. I don't think they may still exist, right? No, it exists, and they're in Syria and Lebanon at this point. And they were Maoists, the DFLP, and they still exist to some degree or other. They're small, but they exist, the DFLP. So there are different Palestinian resistance groups of different political persuasions. So there you go. There you go. Hope that was helpful. Next question. The current crisis in Ecuador with the criminal gangs and the government. Look, how did it get to this point? You're asking me. Look, Correa was a great leader, but Lenin Moreno took apart everything Correa did, and things have only deteriorated from there. But there's also a problem, and this is worth pointing out. The Marxist-Leninist Party of Ecuador plays a negative role. I must point this out. There is a communist party in Ecuador, the PCMLE, they're called. and they are followers of Enver Hoxha, and they look super revolutionary, and they play a very, very negative role, right? This is, and they have a lot of members. They are a big party in Ecuador, and they're a communist party. But they take the position that China is imperialist, that Russia is imperialist. They follow Enver Hoxha and Stalin. And in the name of being super revolutionary, they didn't back Correa. They supported the police coup against Correa. And a lot of the communists in Ecuador are in this shitty organization that is pro-imperialist, that was like trying to help the CIA overthrow Rafael Correa, the president of Ecuador at one point, who was anti-imperialist. Correa was taking Ecuador in an anti-imperialist direction, and this communist party, in the name of, well, he's not a real communist, he's not revolutionary, they play a very negative role, and that has weakened the communist movement in Ecuador, right? You know, you get weird groups in every country, right? But in Ecuador, this is a really, really big party. The Marxist-Leninist Party of Ecuador, a lot of seats in the parliament even, right? You know, and a lot of the labor unions are run by this communist party, and it seems ultra-revolutionary. But in essence, what they do is they align with American imperialism. You know, they denounce Venezuela, they denounce Cuba, all these countries as not being communist enough, right? And this party has really weakened the communist movement in Ecuador, right? And I think that at this point, the ultra lefts are probably the biggest threat to global communism, right? Because the Greek Communist Party, even the Communist Party in Venezuela now, there is socialism in the world today, in China, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, in Cuba. And there is a layer of communist parties that seem ultra revolutionary, that seem, oh, we love Stalin and we love Mao, and they're on the side of the imperialists. And that is a big fucking problem. And in Ecuador, the PCMLE, you know, if they were just some tiny little group, that wouldn't be a problem. But they are a very, very big organization. And they have a lot of influence and power, and they did not back Correa. And they worked against Correa, and they, you know, they played an opportunist role. You know, and because of that, the communist movement in Ecuador, you know, has been very weak. And that this communism, you know, that you know, they preach socialism, but they practice fascism to preserve capitalism for the bosses. I mean, it's the Bob Avakian stuff. Bob Avakian, I wrote this whole book, Letter to Bob Avakian. He's become one of these people, right? I mean, he was used against China, against Deng Xiaoping. I wrote a whole book about this, you know, where the RCP, that played a very good role at one point in the 1970s, deteriorated into a group that, in the name of being ultra revolutionary, is on the wrong side. Right? They're trying to drive Trump out of office. They supported the impeachment of Trump. They denounce Russia. They denounce China. They're on the wrong side everywhere. And they do it while wrapping themselves in the red flag, right? I don't care what you call yourself, right? It doesn't matter what you call yourself. What matters is what side are you on? Are you for Julian Assange? Or are you against him? Are you for sending weapons to Ukraine? Or are you against it? Are you for CIA coups and interventions? Are you against? Are you for internet censorship, or are you against it? Right? And just because you call yourself a communist, whoop-de-doo, anyone can call themselves anything. Are you on the side of the FBI, or are you on the side of the people the FBI are trying to throw in prison? That's all that matters, right? And this label, the label, it does not matter. It really does not matter. There are all kinds of people who call themselves communists who are on the wrong side of everything. And there's all kinds of people that don't call themselves communists that are against the FBI, that are against sending weapons to Ukraine, that are against tech censorship of the internet. And I would much rather work with those people than I would work with somebody who happens to call themselves a communist, but are on the wrong side, right? It does not matter what you call yourself. It matters which side are you on. Right? If a group of workers are on strike, or do you support them or not? Are you for the union, or are you for the bosses? They don't care if you call what you call yourself. They don't care why you're for the bosses. If you say, well, I'm for the bosses because blah, 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 and you have a quote from Marx, they don't care. You're on the side of the bosses. You're in a black neighborhood that's protesting against the police that murdered their relative. Are you with the police, or are you with the black community? And they don't care. if you can justify being with the police on the basis of, well, blah, 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 Marx said, blah, blah, blah. They don't care. What side are you on? Right? And that's what you have to understand when it gets down to all this. It doesn't matter the blah, blah, blah. It matters what side you're on. There is a fight between American imperialism and the people of the world. There is a fight between the FBI and the deep state and the American people. There is a fight between the tech censors and those of us who want to spread the truth about American imperialist crimes. There's a fight between the FBI and the Department of Justice and the Uhuru movement. And, I want to teach you all the ideology that I know, the history, the facts. I write books and all of that. But at the end of the day, in terms of mass work, in terms of who we align with people that are against the state. We align with people that are against imperialism. And it's that simple. All right. And that there are a lot of people who ideologically, in their minds, they would never be against imperialism until it happens to them. Right? Mr. Grossip, the Mr. Grossip skit that we did at the conference. Can't wait till the video of that is up online. The story of Mr. Grossip from Labor's Untold Story. That guy never thought he'd be working with the communists. But then his home got foreclosed. He lost his job, and suddenly he was working with the communists. Right? There are people in the black community that were the most conservative people, were in the military, were not activists at all. But then a relative of theirs got killed by the police, and then suddenly they're hanging out with communists, and suddenly they're reading about, and that history radicalizes you, right? Circumstances radicalize you. There's a lot of people who become radical as an intellectual exercise. Right? They get interested in these ideas for intellectual reasons. It's a form of entertainment or whatever. And then when the actual fight starts, they're on the wrong side. And those people don't matter. Those people are worthless, right? If you are interested in Marxism, but you just got to support the American government in Ukraine, you got to hate Julian Assange, I don't care, right? And I mean, this is what people need to understand. All right. Who is Carroll Quigley? Carroll Quigley was an academic who was a mentor to Bill Clinton. He wrote The Anglo-American Establishment. He wrote Tragedy and Hope. He's a historian of the world and of the United States. When he talked about, he's kind of the guy who originated the understanding of the Eastern establishment and the influence of the British Empire in America. What else do you want to know about him? A very famous American academic who was kind of a mentor to Bill Clinton, who had a theory about divisions in the American elite and the power of the British Empire. What more do you want me to say? The School of Foreign Affairs that was attended by Bill Clinton, very much was crafted based on the theories of Carroll Quigley. Important intellectual. That's all I can say there. All right. All right. Nina Turner tweets several times a week about reparations. Won't say a single word against you. Yeah. And that tells you everything right there. Why have they been targeted, and why has the memo been sent out that you shouldn't support them? If you can't support them, this is one of the most blatant cases of suppression of freedom of speech that has come in recent years. It is really a really blatant attack on people's right to be anti-imperialist, people's right to attend international conferences, people's right to organize in their own community. It's pretty blatant. So you got to support the Uhuru movement. All right, folks. Well, I guess we'll call it a night. I got an early morning tomorrow, so there you go. But we'll put on the closing music. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back. We'll be back soon. Probably tomorrow, if not the next night, right? We're just doing a lot of these streams.
Upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, And the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today.